Hey everybody, this is True Stars TV, and I'm your host, Emily Carrig.
And I'm your co-host, Gwen O'Donnell.
So, how are you doing today, Gwen?
I'm feeling very good. I'm feeling the spring in my step because I feel that spring has sprung here in Connecticut. The daffodils are poking through, and that usually means we're ready for one last snowstorm. But other than that, it's really good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the spring vibe, but you can't really tell because it's thunderstorming here. So,
Oh,
but yeah, it's much nicer. So today we have Jessica Quillin as our special guest. We'll bring her out very soon. She's a fashion editor and a content strategist, and she actually went to Cambridge, which is super impressive.
wow,
She
that's
has a
impressive.
doctorate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk to her about Web3 media. Well, we want to get her perspective on what it what her experience has been like in traditional media, and talk about like what we're trying to do and see if we can learn anything from her and vice versa. I know she's got a lot of interest in Web3 media and decentralizing editorial models and that sort of thing.
Wow.
So we'll be exploring that. Um, and I think maybe we'll talk about like a couple of news highlights.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to just share my screen here.
Should I do the sound effect?
So, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're getting better about like our sound effect tools and all that. Like,
Any minute.
thanks for bearing with us. Yeah, so I don't know if you saw this, but one of our friends, Fernanda Bacard, she's an artist. She just recently sent her artwork into outer space.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
That's
so I got to interview her yesterday and got the scoop on it.
Give us a little bit of the scoop.
So her friend, his name is Sunset Perez. He's a pilot, and he's organizing this fundraiser where they sent, I think, 50 artworks to just outside of Earth via high altitude balloon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then the plan. I mean, like I've heard of a few projects doing this, but usually they're like affiliated with like space programs.
Right.
Um, yeah, but they just sent it up with like a high altitude balloon, and they were able to actually recover the artwork. It landed in Monterrey, Mexico,
Oh my
and
gosh.
yeah, and so they're going to auction it off for a nonprofit actually to
Oh,
bring
that's cool.
awareness to Latin American artists and some of the cool like creative things that they're doing down there. So anyway, it's really cool. You can read the full story on our website, truestars.media. And then also just to like give everyone an update, we announced our cover star, Shreya Bhan, and you can read the full interview with her. We're going to be sharing more like updates on what we're doing with her next. But we'll be having a live panel with her, and you'll be able to collect the limited edition NFT and redeem it for a physical piece of clothing that you can co-design with her. So
That's amazing.
yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, excited about a lot of things that are going on, and we're just continuing to build. And but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's much else at the moment. There's lots happening in the NFT space, or at least like things are coming back. So that's a good sign.
Yes. I did notice yesterday that Bitcoin and the entire market crashed not once but twice.
Mm.
So it was pretty interesting to see, everything's up, everybody's excited. And our friend Alex Becker who some of us may or may not have a crush on, he tweeted out in the morning, there's a lot of excitement even from retail getting into the market. And so he said, I'm expecting my altcoins to take a 30 to 40% haircut, but I'm not selling them, but I'm just warning you that that's probably going to happen. And as you know, they go down and come back up unless you're doing leverage. So if you're just doing spot trading, you can just sit it out and not freak. But I was surprised maybe not surprised, but it was pretty impressive how accurate he was, because only maybe 2 hours later, the entire market crashed like big time. It was a wall of red, and then
Totally.
everything picked right back up, and then in the evening, bam, it happened again. So it's like, wow, 2 in 1 day. That was pretty intense. So all those people who thought, oh, now we're over it, they went right back into leverage, and they probably got whatever they had left is gone now. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be minor corrections, and I'm
yeah,
sure that we're going to have a bigger correction, like anytime there's a new all-time high. But I expect things to keep going up further. NFA, obviously. But yeah, my brother recently contacted me and said he was thinking about putting all of his side hustle money into Bitcoin and ETH. And I was like, you probably should have done that back when it was like, $16,000.
yeah,
But I'm just always super cautious when people who don't do crypto start talking to me about it, and
yeah.
they want
I
to put
always
all
say
the money.
it's a top signal, although in this case, I don't think it's exactly that, but yes. You know what? I think I heard like I think it was Rect Capital, but somebody was saying that they expect, like, there was this whole ramp up to the halvening, which is in April of Bitcoin. So they're saying like there's a big ramp up, but now there's sort of like maybe like a reversal in regards to that. So he might get a couple more. There might be one more like big crash, not crash, but one big correction before that happens in early April. So you might get one more shot at it.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people don't FOMO because
Yeah,
the way that this works, like it's just so volatile and it's most likely going to come back down at some point,
yeah, it's always going to come back down.
Yeah, exactly. Um, okay, so I think let's move on and bring on Jessica Quillin. I'm gonna give her a little intro. So Jessica Quillin is an editorial director, strategist, writer, and lecturer specializing in fashion and luxury. With expertise in crafting high-end content and bespoke brand and content strategies, Jessica has accumulated over a decade of experience in the industry. Her professional journey includes roles as a strategy consultant, in-house editorial director, and writer for international fashion and luxury brands. Notably, Jessica has spent over 7 years as the fashion features editor for Glass. Alongside her fashion career, Jessica holds a PhD in English literature from Cambridge University and is the author of a well-acclaimed book on poetry and music. So I'm bringing Jessica on right now. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Emily and Gwen. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We are building this community-driven media, and I think it's just amazing how many people that we're able to talk to and get insight from. I'm just a content creator who decided to start a magazine, so it's really cool to talk to someone who's got like a serious background in the industry. So yeah, thanks for being here. And just wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about your background? And when we spoke before, we had talked about decentralized editorial models and your interest in that. So I don't know, would you like to add anything there?
So yeah, to start out with, I would say, I've been working in sort of digital content strategy for about 20 years. I sort of started my career post PhD in marketing. I actually ran communications for Washington National Opera, of all places, in DC, kind of working on the art side of things. But I really, kind of had my first experience in, creating content for a website, running a magazine, kind of managing at the time. E-newsletters were kind of a brand new thing. This this is 2003. So, you know, kind of that early landscape of digital media, kind of even within that year. And, you know, over the years, like many people, my career has taken kind of a lot of twists and turns. I spent a lot of time in education and then kind of landed in fashion in 2010, I would say. You know, first freelancing for Glass as a fashion writer, and really loving their sort of, you know, kind of cultural concept for fashion and luxury. You know, they really take this sort of elevated approach to fashion editorial for their print and digital, you know, kind of really bringing in sort of a more, I would say, aesthetic point of view for luxury. I mean, the very first issue that I bought was their very first issue, actually, and it had articles on like Helmut Lang and Chinese opera, and it really appealed to me, kind of obviously with my background in the arts and humanities. And so, you know, I started writing first for the print edition, and then I kind of switched to online, and then took on the role quickly as online fashions features editor, and kind of eventually spanned both digital and print. And, you know, I think kind of working in that sort of kind of bridging the print, but with the digital kind of there and the sort of more traditional landscape of fashion media. I mean, fashion media was still quite healthy, I would say, kind of 2010 to kind of 2019-ish. And, you know, still kind of enjoyed sort of more readership. And I think even like bloggers at the time were sort of more on the sort of influencer space, with, you know, social media kind of slowly starting up. And obviously over sort of the course of, you know, kind of 2010 to kind of pre-pandemic there, slowly, I think the world of traditional media started to get hit over and over again by sort of growing social media platforms. The impact of Instagram was palpable. I think, you know, kind of early in the days, people kind of tried to laugh it off as just sort of this photo sharing platform. But I think sort of content creators like yourself and everyone kind of coming on and owning their own space and owning their own voice when it came to sort of especially fashion and style, and coming on with not just, you know, outfits of the day, but also like a serious point of view, and in many cases, a serious depth of knowledge for fashion and luxury. You know, they themselves became legitimate players in fashion and luxury, and sort of began to threaten that traditional kind of print model of, you know, the Condé Nast of the world, with their sort of, you know, top-down approach to being the only source on fashion and luxury. And obviously the bloggers themselves are kind of already occupying that space. So I think there's been sort of that sort of changing landscape of digital since, you know, 2010-ish. And, you know, I think when the pandemic hit, for me, that was sort of the big kind of, you know, I don't want to say nail in the coffin of, you know, kind of traditional fashion media, but it was definitely, I think, a signal that it needed to change and evolve. And I still believe that. I don't believe that print is dead, but I think that definitely kind of new models of media are needed. And, you know, sort of the newer tools of Web3, I think, open up a lot of new possibilities for this. And I think, you know, the evolution of sort of content creators themselves, but I would say also the space and the tools and the sort of, you know, way that people interact with the technologies, you know, kind of shows so many opportunities for new media models like you're pursuing, and kind of more creator driven types of platforms. And then I should also point out that sort of underneath all of this, while still also being a fashion editor, I've been actually an enterprise content strategist working on sort of the corporate side of things alongside that, because fashion didn't fully pay the bills along the way with everything. So I think working in sort of that kind of corporate space, I mean, look, I've worked with big brands, everyone from, you know, Apple and Microsoft kind of in-house. I was in-house at Gartner for 4 years, I think, on sort of that research kind of side of things, leading multimedia and multilingual content strategy, and kind of looking at more traditional organizations that are still themselves trying to change and adapt to new environments. And it's sort of this need for me, and Emily, I know you and I have talked about this before, but a need for me for media and, you know, kind of brands themselves, I think, to take a more strategic approach to sort of communications and content in general, which is obviously why I founded my company. It's a working title. We just do kind of content strategy for fashion and luxury. And part of that is to help brands transition from this sort of traditional media landscape into sort of this new future. And if they're looking, whether they're at Web 2, Web 2.5, or Web 2.3, for us, all of it needs that sort of core strategy for content behind it to keep that sort of brand information kind of unified across channels, whether you're a fashion magazine over here or you're Burberry over here trying to sell, you know, kind of close to customers. For us, it's all about that sort of cohesive omni-channel kind of framework and, you know, literally in the weeds model of how content is related across platforms to enable that sort of, you know, kind of omni-channel experience across the board. And I think that sort of, for me at least, that sort of a centralized approach is, in a sense, an argument for a decentralized platform like a Web3 type of model things where the content is sort of being feeded into this sort of holistic kind of ecosystem of content, but like the content itself is kind of, centrally managed and organized within, that sort of content management system that enables kind of multiple people to publish in all there, but it's all built around, again, this sort of, it's a decentralized content model, but it's still a content model, right? Each of the pieces sort of have their interrelated parts and kind of support that universe of content built on sort of, the construct of discrete content types you're putting into it. So for me, I think as our sort of vocabulary for fashion and luxury specifically, because that's my space, has evolved and the tools are evolving, I think, the integration of new voices, obviously from creators into sort of that new media landscape, offers new opportunities for both media and brands to sort of themselves evolve with it. But the space is still behind in many ways. So I think for me, I'm sort of here to kind of help brands navigate that transition from kind of old into new. But it's always a choice. I mean, we run fashionstrategyweekly.com, which is a B2B publication we run. We actually early on, you and I, Emily, were discussing this a few weeks ago. We early on were really trying to decide what our own publishing model was for this. And, I chose a traditional kind of Web 2.5 based site that enabled us to like eventually launch a podcast and things like that, and we do a very kind of traditional hub and spoke model. It's a small content team we have that kind of pushes content out for it. But we considered a Web3 model because for me, the community part is very important. But it's still for us, a sense, I think, of, because we're B2B trying to participate within the traditional media landscape as a way of sort of working to change it. But, it's always a choice. And, I think that's why I hugely admire what you guys are building, because I think it's where media needs to go in this sort of, more grassroots type of way. But again, it's that more holistic model that allows the content itself to kind of drive the experience, but it's also kind of, allowing the content to be where the people want it to be, and the people also help shape it. So.
Yeah, that's sorry, amazing overview. Yeah. So I think, like one of the things that really stands out is the difference between like the top down broadcasting model and like the more grassroots, like community and like setting trends from the bottom up. And I feel like that's happening now in the fashion industry and in probably a lot of other industries. But I see that with media and, in industries. So like, are you having a hard time like explaining this to brands, like how this is happening, and are there challenges there?
So there's sort of two sides to this for me as a sort of content strategist who works with brands. I think there's sort of, obviously I have the big hump just to come over and explain what content strategy is in the first place, because all the brands think they either already have it or they don't necessarily know how to benchmark it based on sort of the way they approach content currently. A lot of brands and media themselves approach content as a very almost I don't want to say monolithic concept, but it's very much something that is siloed within different teams. Like there's social media content over here, there's web content over here, there's marketing content over here, and there's communications content over here. And the brand team is over here, and even the tech team is over here, and they operate in all of these silos, and there's no connection in the middle to sort of create that centralized, kind of plan, framework, and kind of model to help drive a consistent content experience kind of across the board, right? So if you're a brand or even a media model, without that sort of I'm not even saying a brand has to have a hub and spoke model for it, but without having sort of a documented plan for like what your vision is for content, where all your content is, what are your sort of centralized principles and frameworks and processes. I mean, even if you have all of your content, I mean, the number of people who don't even have like a formal content management system or workflow for content is quite, there's a lot of people that don't. So there's that side of things for that. And also I think a lot of brands and media don't necessarily fully grasp the nature of what for me is sort of a new brand consumer paradigm, if you will. I think brands are used to, as you say, that top-down approach. And I think now we're in a place where you've sort of got, I have this graphic that has like, brand voice on one side, brand stories on the other, and the consumers on this side with consumer stories. And it's like this sort of spectrum, right? And in the middle is sort of where consumer stories and brand stories meet in the middle, and the consumers actually have their own equal voice as media creators on the other side, along with brands on this side, right? In the media as well. And, it's in that space where they overlap, which is where modern content needs to be, especially for media. So, magazines and brands need to sort of embrace the creators there, but the creators also need to kind of be part of that sort of brand marketing vision. So when I go out and lecture on influencer marketing and things like this, it's always about, bringing creators into sort of that media and brand kind of planning landscape, making them part of your strategy and helping them sort of, craft stories that make sense for their voice and their authentic voice, but also that match your, kind of brand marketing goals and things like that. So say you're, a traditional fashion magazine looking to sort of, evolve more towards a more, I'm not even saying if you don't have to go fully decentralized, but at least to start becoming more flexible to kind of new voices coming in and helping you reach, new consumers on TikTok or even within a more kind of gaming based landscape or, Fortnite or whatever, kind of that sort of way of doing it, allowing the creators to sort of you shape the experience, but the creators can come in and still have their own voice and represent your values in a way that you two have agreed to in advance, but allowing them to sort of exercise and express their creativity. And for me, all of that drives a better user experience for audiences on the other end. But it, again, comes through having that content strategy in the beginning where you all agree, okay, this is what this activation is about. You're not scripting the influencer, but certainly these are the goals we want to do. These are the products we want to promote, and these are the values we want to get across here. And so let's, kind of go in and create this experience together. So I think for me, yes, new decentralized models open up, new possibilities for communication, but, it's a bit like AI is never going to take over anything again for me without content strategy, because it needs structure. And again, a human experience needs structure, and to make it not chaotic, to make it meaningful, and to make it vision based for things that people want to participate in. I've been saying this since day one of the very first metaverse I ever entered. You need to think about who's receiving everything on the other side. This is why the traditional broadcast doesn't work anymore. It's in it, and this is the same whether you're a creator or a brand. It's who is your audience? What are you trying to say to them? But also, what do they need from you, and what do you want them to experience? And trying to figure out that space where you get to still express your authentic point of view and what you want to say, and putting across your expertise, but also allowing them to kind of participate in that, right? And it's this sort of, again, why I keep taking this holistic view, and it's like, how do you create this kind of new marketplace for shared storytelling, for kind of more dynamic, kind of immersive shared experiences in a very real way. So like, yes, you're kind of shaping the conversation and promoting your products, but you're allowing the people you're selling it to or are communicating with to have a say in what information they receive, and they get to participate in it as well. Obviously, this is a tricky thing when you're a luxury brand, which is kind of where our company comes in a lot. But for me, that sort of decentralized model, it's more fun, obviously, for especially younger Gen Alpha and Gen Z consumers, but also, kind of as tools and technologies evolve towards things like, live shopping and a lot of things that are much just more kind of like in your face, direct, like content to people like TikTok. It just makes more sense, right? Because it's more immediate, it's more authentic, but it's also more democratic. So.
Yeah, super interesting.
I'm very curious, because I think what you're bringing up is something that, whether it's fashion or really kind of almost any sector, but it seems to me like with your background, like you studied, I think, literature, and you're a writer. And so I'm hearing you say storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we're coming from a place that, like, especially now with all these different platforms, storytelling has become something everybody's participating in. And, these stories are just bringing us together. So I wonder how you come to brands, luxury brands, as a storyteller, and how you help them to tell their story and bring, like you said, all those different spokes of the wheel into the hub. How do you communicate that? What does that look like? And what does that feel like for you?
So that's a tricky thing. So I would say, yes, for me, it's all the heart of story. I have a PhD in a book on 19th century British poetry and music. Wow. For me, this is part of what drew me into fashion, right? It's all about, it's basically all about synesthesia. Basically, I argue that a 19th century poet tried to write an opera, which he did. I have actual documented proof that he tried to write an opera. But anyways, to go outside of that, but to move into fashion, look, I spent years as a writer. I spent years, kind of expressing my own opinion on, content, and writing for me is sort of a core part of everything I sort of do in terms of that sensibility. But, I think as a content strategist, I've sort of sometimes have to divorce myself from the storytelling part in terms of I'm not, at least in my current role with our company, I'm not here to tell brands what stories to tell, right? I'm not here to tell content creators what stories you should tell. What I'm here to do is to make it possible for them to kind of empower their stories in the right way to the right people and kind of get better impact of that and kind of make those stories have more authenticity and maybe sometimes more structure to that, but actually to be more meaningful and significant. And I think to sort of benchmark that again, it comes to me for that education part of what sort of content strategy is and isn't. On the one hand, it's sort of this sort of strategic approach to sort of structuring content across the board so that, content is more meaningful, but it's also keep it more updated across the board, right? It's to keep it more authentic where it is to get the right content to the right people using your data and things like that. So for me, storytelling from a brand perspective and even a content creator perspective, it does come from those kind of unexpected kind of authentic moments, but it's, kind of making sure that you understand the platform you're on and understand kind of what kind of content works best within that. And sometimes the content that works best within the platform is not the content that the people who set up the platform even knew that it was there to set up. And my current example for this, you probably know where I'm going with this, is, TikTok has been kind of moving towards, for a long time, it was always the short video platform, right? And they sort of reintroduced the longer videos recently. And then along comes, this woman, is it Risa Nisa, the one who kind of has her 3 p.m. talk show with everyone, just like really long videos and these multi-part kind of like incredibly in-depth, like 52-part storytelling on her relationship with everything. And the people in TikTok are literally sitting here like, okay, something like that was not something they had planned for, right? And I think a lot of brands and, kind of marketers and stuff looking at this space are trying to figure out what type of marketing opportunity comes out of that. And for me, that's not always the lesson you should, as a marketer, be taking from this type of thing, but it does for me open up the possibility, the argument again for knowing your brand, knowing your stories, and figuring out sort of the possibilities of storytelling you have within the sort of platforms you are on there, and kind of figuring out where you can differentiate, right? Figuring out kind of how you sort of can empower your teams to maybe create, if fashion, for instance, loves short films, right? It loves to do films and things like that. But like, if you want to do an artistic film over here, how do you sort of take that same content and make it reusable on platforms in a way that appeals to users on Instagram? How do you tell those stories from that same kind of piece of content over on TikTok without your content teams having to recreate the entire thing? I mean, this, I guess, is where the waste within kind of brands for me comes from a lot, or rather the lack of vision in a way, is that you don't need to like content reusability and repurposing is just for me very fundamental to kind of content strategy. And content creators do this every single day, but brands and media don't so much, right? You don't see as much sort of content crossover between sort of fashion media over here and fashion brands over there, but content creators are constantly doing it, right? You'll write a YouTube video over here and you'll see a same sort of similar shorter or scripted version on TikTok or something. And it's like looking to appeal to different audiences where they are. So for me, the storytelling that brands need to do, yes, it's all about authenticity, but storytelling is really down to, understanding the platform, understanding the medium, and targeting your message in the right way, that you're not being sort of top down, but also that you're I think creating moments of magic and spontaneity, if you will, but by sort of not making your people put in all the extra work for things from that brand end. And I think, again, for fashion media, I guess it applies to any media in general. I feel like, or at least I hope, the landscape is going towards, especially with, AI search and stuff coming back to this, we're moving towards quality, right? And for me, quality comes again from that sort of those authentic voices, those authentic stories. So it's always looking for opportunities, like what stories you have within your organization. I say this to brands every day, that you're not talking about, right? That's not pre-planned by some marketing agency you've hired, but like, what stories can you tell about, your textiles or your fabric or your brand history or things like that, or even about your contemporary collections, or, have fun with it. I mean, look at all the success Jacquemus has done with their AI-based fashion ads, putting handbags on wheels and things like this. And it's those sort of, I feel like sometimes, at least as a fashion person, or even just the media in general, we're so big on like hype and immediate kind of, thrills for things, that get the fun part of it sometimes. I mean, it's just there, but there's also a need for research and a need for that sort of quality experience as well. So I would be happier, I think, if brands and people just spend the time to think about creating meaningful content, so that way we're not just all filled with junk. Because I've had enough of AI content. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, AI targeted the right way can be really cool, but it's just, I like the real people doing the real storytelling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, it takes the real voice out of the content to just do, AI. Like, it can be a helpful tool, but no one wants to read something without a voice, you know?
Definitely. And I guess when it comes to things like decentralized models of publishing, and one of the things I keep hearing over and over again of why it won't work, and I feel this because I'm actually admin for Fashion's only Mastodon instance, and I still can't quite figure out what to do with the space in terms of this micro community because it's decentralized, and it's decentralized, but I still have to manage it, right? I still have to
right.
It's decentralized. I still have to people. I mean, it was a big deal. Like in 2022 when I first set it up, I had a bunch of people, and a bunch of people sort of float in and out, and I'm still having to. I mean, it's like a Discord space, right? I have to create content there. I have to keep people there, and it's hard. And honestly, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have a lot of time to do that space, but I think within this sort of people kind of shy away from decentralized storytelling, both because they either, at least in the case of Mastodon, for instance, can't figure out how it works. And it's not the same kind of pre-programmed algorithm we've all been trained to use from like TikTok and things like this. Or it just feels chaotic to them. And they're used to having guardrails. They're used to having structure. They're used to having this sort of expected experience. And I think the sort of decentralized model scares people a little bit because they feel like it's going to be a cacophony of too many stories and things that are not targeted to their interests. So, I think the future of kind of all of this for me is finding that blend between the authentic storytelling and the personalization aspect of this. So you're making sure you're telling the right stories to the right people. And it's not like my husband loves TikTok because he's like spent time with it. It's learned his habits. Every time I log on, I'm just like, I get really overwhelmed really quickly because it's just like too many random videos. And, it's better because I've actually spent time posting my own things, and I get now fashion things on there. Okay, it's like a mix of fashion and running things because I'm a marathoner as well. But when I don't use it for a number of days, it comes back and it starts putting in random things, and it gets very overwhelming. So I think these technologies need to continue to sort of start to focus on the user experience side of things, even while still seeding, kind of more content, because people get tired easily of sort of new things and having to do that. So
true.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I guess like you brought up some things that had me thinking. Like we have been thinking with True Stars that we need to figure out who are our like ideal readers or who's our audience basically. So we're going to put together some profiles for that. Do you have any like guidance for brands and other media companies on how to do that kind of thing?
I do. I'm a content strategist, so I know exactly where to go with this one. I mean, look, people when say designing a new website spend a lot of time hiring UX designers to come in and set up user personas for them and doing journey mapping and things like that. Very few brands do that from a content perspective, right? To actually sit down and figure out what is the content journey our users are going on, and actually spending the time to map out that customer journey from a content perspective, right? And figuring out, how do you want people to like travel through the stories you're telling, right? So if you're, initially sort of introducing them to your brand or your concept or your story on, say, YouTube or Instagram or even TikTok through like a video or something else like that, but you're trying to invite them to, explore deeper and come to your website and read your articles and things like that, thinking about sort of where they first encounter your brand, how they come through and the types of content they, kind of encounter there, and then how you're bringing them back and creating that sort of brand loyalty there. For me is how you do that, right? So you do need to sort of obviously sit down and define, your profiles or your sort of ideal audiences there. I think it's, for me, I've kind of moved away from the traditional sort of UX persona type of thing where you give people a personality and a name and like a life, which is, it doesn't work as well for me from a content perspective as sort of those generalized groups. So you'll have like, your group of, I don't know, like, working professionals, female professionals, 40 to 45, whatever, making some sort of generalization like that, working people who may be balancing family life, whatever, things like that. But, narrowed down profiles, but they're still generalized enough that you're not like giving them a life and a personality, because it gets down weird DEI, things you don't need to do. You don't need to kind of like assign people to be people, but you do need to kind of assign them, habits and levels of interaction. And it attaches needs and expectations and preferences for content and things like this. So, even taking like Gen Z as a blanket group is not particularly useful because Gen Z is obviously a big group, or even Gen Alpha, right? I mean, look, I'm mother of a 12-year-old, and putting Gen Alpha in one box is definitely not, kind of keeping him in one box. I mean, I have a 12-year-old who he does spend an extraordinary amount of time in like this weird auction app on Roblox, but he also loves 80s music, right? And Disney and like a lot of and basketball runs everything. So I think building profiles like that can sort of help you target content in a specific way, and thinking about how those sort of persona groups individually travel through content across your different platforms can help you start to figure out what type of content they want. I mean, my son, whenever he wants to learn anything, he gets ideas from things like he gets actually ideas from Roblox because he spends a lot of time over there. Like he's in this auction thing. He wanted to know how real auctions work, right? So he went straight to YouTube, because when he wants to know how to do anything, he goes to YouTube to learn. The kid knows how to do all sorts of things I never even knew. So again, understanding that unique journey for him may be different than something like, me, right? When I see something I may want to learn about from, I don't know, an Instagram video, I'm going to encounter it on Instagram. He's not on Instagram, but I still don't go to YouTube because I'm, upper millennial Gen X kind of there. I would go to a Google search and look for an article there almost before I would do a video, because again, I'm just not a big video person. So I think, again, thinking about what types of content people consume and kind of where they consume it, what are they doing? I do everything on my phone. I'm basically writing a book on my phone on luxury content strategy because I'm busy, right? I'm going from meeting to meeting and I always make notes in the notes on my phone. And it's just, again, understanding how people sort of, take notes and where they experience content, kind of throughout the moments of their day and their life can help you plan media that will meet them where they are. And again, it's that content journey and how you guide people from one place to another. And it's not just the content you're putting in yourself and the stories you're telling, but also what types of like information are helping you them guide there. Like if you're building a website, literally, like this is part of what I do for brands, understanding like the language you put in the buttons and the content design you put on the page and helping direct people in more meaningful ways, not just saying like learn more here, making those calls to action and those buttons themselves even meaningful matter as much as the headlines you put on the page and the pictures and the text that you write. So it's a very holistic thing. But again, for me, even for the things that you guys are building, just trying to think about, who your ideal customers are and what kind of experience do you want to create for them and how big is your ecosystem? Like where do you need to be and where do you not need to be? I've been telling brands this since 2010 when social media kind of came along, and it's just gotten worse. But everybody feels this pressure to be everywhere at once when it comes to content. And that is kind of, unless you're a big brand with the resources of a Gucci, that is a huge mistake. It's really about starting small and taking a test and learn approach to content. Like if your website is your primary platform, focus your content around that first. And if you want to build a marketing model of that, pick another social channel, like pick a TikTok, pick a YouTube. Don't try to do all of them at the same time, because if you try to do 2 platforms on top of a website at the same time, it's just going to be too much, especially for a smaller team. Mm-hmm. So, create a phased approach to adding media channels to your content strategy, and it'll be much easier to kind of maintain and grow them, but also to test engagement, right? Test what content works and doesn't work in a way that you can then adjust small rather than having to feel the pressure to, manage your brand in too many spots.
I've heard that, like if you're everywhere, you're nowhere,
Yeah. Right. Wow. That was fascinating. You are brilliant. We're so happy to have you. Yeah. Now here's something that I heard you talk about. This is a little bit going on a detour now. I heard you talk about being a marathoner. Mm-hmm. So, and I hear you're in meetings and you're writing a book on your phone and you have a family and oh my goodness. So can you tell us a little bit about like how running fits into your journey and how like does that factor into your self-care regimen? And tell us, I think we're also well, I can't even think of the word. We're just over scheduled and whatnot, that I think it's really hard sometimes to fit in that stuff. So what's your strategy for that?
Well, to confess, as my run coach I don't have as much of a strategy now as I was able to, say, during the pandemic when I had a lot more time. Running a company is the best thing I've ever done. Like being a parent, it's just constant work all the time. And I think it's really, running for me is my happy place. It's my self-care. It's literally the only me time I get a lot of days. But it's been a period for me I guess you feel like as a runner, you're constantly in a period of transition because you're either, training for a race or you finished a race and you're waiting for some space to it's time to train for the next one. But for me, running has been a place where I feel like I'm taking action, and that's going to sound really strange, but I started running. So I participated in the Women's March in early 2017, and I was sort of left with, okay, I want to be a person who does things. That's awesome. I was here in DC. I really wanted to be a person who does things. This is again a reason we eventually started our company, because I just didn't want to be a person who sat around and talked about things I wanted to do. And running was always something I half did, but I never fully committed to it. And I just started training for my first race, and I got extremely hooked on sort of being not just like it is a community and a culture and all of that, but running for me is sort of that self-discipline. It sort of centers me, and it's what helps keep the rest of my day and my life organized. It makes me a better mom, a better entrepreneur, and a better sort of just human being in general. I'm much nicer when I go for a run, but also I think it's just that open space to think, right? I'm a writer who doesn't get to spend a lot of time writing. I mean, it's just, but like I played the piano for 22 years and haven't touched it in a really long time, and I don't practice that much, but it's still part of who I am. And running, I think for me, is this place to be kind of relaxed and expressive and not under the demands of, literally 50 people needing me to do 50,000 things every minute, which is the rest of my day. So,
Right.
It's, you make time for it. I used to be a 4 a.m. runner, not so safe anymore. So I've trying to move away to trying to find other moments during the day. But it's not all about you make the time, I would say, for it. But for me, it brings value to my existence as a person, and, helps me feel like I'm just sort of, I don't know, participating in something that's not just out for, making money and doing all these other things, but it's just, the running community is immensely supportive and immensely inclusive, and just very, I think, just open and happy. I do the Disney Marathon every year because it's just like, 4 hours of just super happy, random, childish fun. My husband always says it's like how you would ruin a trip to Disney, but it's not. It's just this very fun, playful thing. And as adults, we all get a lot of time to be fun and playful, right? But for me, especially as a very, I'm immensely serious the rest of the time. This is my non-serious time there, but I think it brings that sort of energy and perspective to the rest of my existence and my day. So.
That's amazing. Yeah, Gwen's a runner too, right? You've done marathons.
I have run 4 times the New York Marathon, but for a charity, so I didn't have to qualify. Thank God, because I am not really a runner, more like a walker, or a trudger,
power walker.
But yes, it's wonderful and I love it. So I agree with you. It's really great. Although I haven't outrun as much as I should. And I think I just need to go out and get some. I was just thinking when you're talking, like, I've got to get some new running shoes. That always inspires you,
Yeah, I need to get some too. I'm actually supposed to do a half tomorrow, but I decided not to because this has been this week. I'm just finishing here. I literally have gotten maybe 5 hours of sleep in 4 days. So I'm kind of like, I'm not sure a half is the best idea. I ran 2 back-to-back marathons, one in November and one in January, and got sick both times. So I'm like,
oh my gosh,
my body again. I'm waiting to train for marathon season in the fall. So, but yeah, no, it's just
good for you.
But running as a woman, I should say, is it's a challenge. And I would say that, I'm literally terrified to run outside these days, to be quite honest, unless I'm running in broad daylight, because women have been attacked near where I live, and it's just a whole kind of feeling of that. If I do go out, I always feel like I have to be lit up like a Christmas tree. I carry, a knife, I carry pepper spray, and that's this whole kind of thing. So, yeah, it needs to change. I need to be able to go outside and do things I love without feeling like I'm going to be attacked or I have to run in a very specific box.
I agree. It's too bad. Like, people say, "Oh, are you afraid of because I run on the track in this or a path, whatever?" And there's woods, and I'm like, "Are you afraid of bears?" I'm like, "No, I'm afraid of men." I'm like around every corner. The whole time you're running, you're just looking.
Yeah, I've been chased. I've been screamed at. I've been chased. I've been screamed at. I've had cars drive down streets following me. I run. It's just the whole thing. I just feel like, and it's always the advice is like, women need to adjust this. You need to adjust that. You need to not wear this. Wear that. Why are we always the ones who have to adjust to things? It's like
we're the ones doing it wrong, right?
Yeah. Like women in business. Eternally, my sort of thing is people are always giving me advice, which is slightly hilarious because I'm like, if you try to give me advice, I will literally do the opposite. I have stubborn tattooed on my arm, and I'm not kidding. But it's just this
Love it.
thing. People are always trying to correct us and try to correct me and do things a different way. And I'm like, I'm 48 years old. I have a PhD. I have like 20 odd years of work experience. I run my own company with my business partner. And it's just like, I'm okay. I don't need you telling me how to do things. And yet people are still coming in and doing this. I mean, I think part of that is because I work in a creative field, and being a content person, content people are always correcting each other, because you always feel like you want to make the language perfect, but it's like, you don't always need to edit me. But even like in a workplace there, but it's just like, women are doing pretty well on our own. We don't need people to tell us how to do things better. We don't need to be improved. So
it's so upsetting, because like, I mean, I feel like I'm earlier in my career, right? And I'm 36, but people look at me, especially in the workplace, and think that I'm like some young ingenue. And when people talk to you that way, you start to believe that.
Yep.
And I don't know, like, it's upsetting that you are still being talked to that way. So yeah, I mean, the advice, it always to me seems like telling you to be more, I guess, to fit into more of like the masculine way of doing things in business. But like, women, I mean, some women are just never going to be, we're not going to fit into that. Or
no, and we shouldn't. This is why we need to run things. We should just be running everything. It would just work a lot better. I mean,
So yeah. I guess like one last thing, we didn't really touch on like governance models, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, as far as like decentralized media, and or how could like governance maybe correct or address some of the issues in traditional media.
So this is near and dear to my heart, from having been, one of the core sort of things that content strategy does is bring content governance to organizations, right? You create this sort of structured approach where if content is not centrally, or like if there's not even a central team, content doesn't have to be centrally kind of run, right? You don't necessarily need to take a hub and spoke model to that, but you do need an integrated plan to manage things with discrete roles and rules and processes, and kind of ways of shared understanding in terms of how content is planned, managed, updated, archived, and I think what the rules are and are not. And I think that sort of model of governance applies as much to the content itself and what that structure is to the people that run it, right? So this whole idea of kind of decentralized kind of business, kind of management that you see a lot in Web3 spaces, with this sort of new model of kind of shared ownership and things like that. Shared ownership and kind of governance models, I think, have a lot of kind of teeth, but they do need structure, and I think they do need planning, and they do need a sense of, okay, these are the people involved. This is the sort of the way the roles are. I mean, it's like a content governance plan, right? You set out, this is the structure of the committee. These are the roles involved. These are everyone's responsibilities. These are the expectations for those. And when I do a content governance plan, like I did one for a huge enterprise client a couple of years ago, and it literally lays out, okay, this is the team involved. This is how often they meet. But sometimes there's like a committee that meets once a year, like a big committee. Then the smaller committees meet on like a monthly basis with this sort of established cadence, and you literally document phase by phase, step by step, exactly what the structure of that committee is, how often they meet, what the agenda looks like for those meetings, like well in advance of that. And sort of then you start to kind of be able to create shared principles, shared processes, shared values, shared rules for everything like that. And, I tried to channel a little bit of that even to when setting up my little Mastodon instance, making sure there are obviously rules for entry, and, I will kick people out if they don't follow them and things like that. And, I think for decentralized Web3 type of governance model, again, it's making sure that you have a sense of everyone is still open and the expectations are there that they can express their own creative point of view. But you still, when it comes to content across the board, no matter what content you're talking about, whether it's business content, social media content, you need guardrails. We're human beings. It's just that. I mean, this is going to be my same argument that I give for AI when I do AI workshops, is that AI works best when you give it guardrails, right? It works best with structure. It works best on content structures, like content that is itself has a kind of a, it works best on modular content. If you can put it in structured content that's reusable, that's even better. It has to know what what rules to follow if you want it to replicate it. And for me, that sort of decentralized governance model is similar. You need everyone to know, it's a bit like school, what they're supposed to do, what's expected from them, and then they can sort of learn to operate within that smaller world. That's sort of how that works. And I think for that media landscape, for shared content, it's, you can write whatever you want, but you have to follow these minimum kind of standard expectations, and these are our standard operating procedures for this. And if you break these rules, then you can't participate in this content community anymore, kind of thing like that. And that's, for me, is how you maintain things like better privacy. You can maintain sort of this sense of ownership as well, but also this sense that we all have the same values and expectations here, and it creates that sort of minimum standard for civility, if you will.
Yeah, that's how we plan to approach it, because we want people to be able to participate and express themselves, but within the guidelines and the editorial guidelines we have. And, maybe you can write something, but it won't get put up on the front page, so to speak, unless it reaches like a certain, it ticks the boxes. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's so many ways to do things, right? And so many possibilities here. So I'm excited to test things out and learn from people like you and the community. And so I don't know if Gwen, if you had anything else to add, or.
Well, I think that I don't have anything to add. I mean, how do you add? This woman is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so brilliant, Jessica. Thank you.
I mean, I could just listen to you like for hours. You're just so fascinating. But thank you so much for, just sharing all your expertise. And, I hope maybe you could come back and talk more about, because we feel like we opened all these little boxes, and each one could just be a whole show, because you just know so much stuff. So
yeah, like we could do. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we could do like a whole episode just on like user generated content or something, and
absolutely.
And talk for an hour. So I guess really quick, how do people find you? What's the best way? You have a podcast as well?
Yeah, so I run fashionstrategyweekly.com, and our podcast is there. Our podcast is called FSW Conversations. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's also on fashionstrategyweekly.com as well. So that's the sort of media side of what we do there. We publish pretty weekly, but we publish a lot of in-depth reports and things like that on fashion strategy for B2B decision makers there. And my company site it's workingtitle.com on that side. And then if you're a runner, I'm on Instagram as Style Runner PhD of all things. So
I saw that. Yeah. Great. So we'll have all your links in the description if people want to find you. But thank you. I'm going to wrap things up so that you can get on with your day. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jessica.